This is Bob, and he's got a huge problem. The world's governments owe more hay than exists across all of Wall Street Meadow combined. America alone owes 38 trillion bales, and it's adding another trillion every 5 months. But here's the part that keeps Bob up at night. Every major country on this pasture is borrowing. Every single one. So Bob's been staring at the books, trying to answer one question nobody seems to want to ask. If everyone's in debt, who's the creditor? This is the global debt paradox explained. Over 100 trillion bullions in government debt, every major economy borrowing more than it produces. And the strangest part, the creditor isn't who you think it is. It might not even be a who at all. Think of it like a pasture with 1,000 bulls. Every bull needs hay to survive, to feed its herd, build fences, keep the calves healthy. But none of them grow enough hay on their own, so they borrow. Bob borrows hay from the bull next door. That bull borrowed from a bull across the river, and that bull, he borrowed from a pension barn, a place where working cows deposit a little hay every month, hoping to get it back when they're too old to graze. Reasonable, relatable, and completely insane at scale. Here's where it gets strange. Some bulls borrow hay just to pay back the hay they already owe. Others lend hay they don't actually have. They write a promise on a piece of bark and call it a hay bond. And the biggest bulls? They've got private hay printing machines called central barns, which can create new bales out of thin air. Yes, really. That's the system. So the hay moves in circles. Country A lends to country B, who lends to country C, who lends back to country A. Everyone owes, everyone lends. And the total hay owed across all of Wall Street Meadow? Far more than all the hay that actually exists. Welcome to the paradox, where the debt is real, but the hay is mostly imaginary. Here's how this was supposed to work. Legitimately. Governments borrow because it makes sense, at first. You need roads, hospitals, fences for the herd. You don't have enough bullions right now, so you issue hay bonds, pension barns, foreign bulls, commercial grazing banks. They buy those bonds. In return, you promise to pay them back with grazing fees. That's interest. Simple enough. This system worked for decades. Borrowing to invest, paying it back through growth. After the Great Drought of the 1930s, governments learned that spending during hard times could keep the herd alive. And it worked. For a while. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Governments didn't just borrow during droughts anymore. They borrowed during bull runs, too. They borrowed to pay for things that didn't grow the pasture, then borrowed more just to cover the grazing fees on what they'd already borrowed. And the creditors evolved. Pension barns, mutual grazing funds, insurance herds, shadow barns operating outside any fence or regulation, central barns buying their own government's bonds with freshly printed bales. The first warning sign? When the borrower and the lender became the same bull. Here's where it gets worse. Global government debt has crossed 100 trillion bullions. Total public and private debt across Wall Street Meadow? Over 250 trillion. More than 2.5 times everything the entire pasture produces in a year. Bob's looking at numbers that don't fit on the page anymore. Now, who's collecting the grazing fees on all this debt? Not small working cows. It's institutional prize bulls. Asset managers, pension barns, hedge funds, insurance herds. They hold the bonds. They collect the interest. And the more governments borrow, the more these prize bulls earn in guaranteed grazing fees. In some developing pastures, governments now spend more on interest payments than on health or education for their calves. Over 3 billion working cows live in herds where debt service outpaces schools. And yes, this is exactly as grim as it sounds. Here's where it gets circular. Japan borrows from its own pension barns. America borrows from Japan, China, and its own federal barn. China borrows domestically while lending back to America. Everyone is simultaneously the borrower and the lender. It's not a line, it's a loop. And the loop feeds itself. When interest payments grow faster than the economy, governments borrow more to cover the gap. That creates more debt, which creates more interest, which requires more borrowing. The grazing fees on American debt alone now exceed what they spend on defense. Funny how that works out. This isn't contained to one corner of Wall Street meadow. Developing herds are paying nearly $1 trillion bullions a year just in interest to foreign creditors. When rich pastures raise their grazing fees, interest rates, the cost of borrowing skyrockets for everyone else. The poorest calves pay the highest prices. They didn't design this system. They just got trapped in it. This pattern has a name. It's what happened before the stampede of 2008. Debt layered on debt, hidden in shadow barns, packaged and resold until nobody knew who actually owned what. We said never again. Global debt today is roughly double what it was then. So, never again lasted about 15 years. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. There is no scenario where this debt gets fully repaid. Not through growth, not through cuts, not through inflation. The system doesn't need repayment. It needs new borrowers. Always. What a coincidence. So what does this mean for you? If you're a working cow with a pension, your retirement hay is sitting inside government bonds. Your future depends on governments being able to pay back what they owe. If they can't, your pension barn has a problem, which means you have a problem. If you're renting a patch of pasture, interest rates determine what your landlord charges. When governments borrow more, rates go up. Your grazing costs go up. Your hay drifts further away. If you're a calf in a developing herd, your government is choosing right now between paying foreign creditors and building you a school. Over 60 developing nations have already made that choice. The creditors are winning. And if you're wondering who the actual creditor is in all of this, it's not a country. It's not a person. It's a system. A web of pension barns, insurance herds, central barns, mutual funds, hedge funds, shadow barns, and sovereign wealth pastures spread across every corner of Wall Street meadow. The creditor is the financial architecture itself, and it collects grazing fees from every bull, cow, and calf on the planet. And Bob? Bob's doing just fine, thanks for asking. He manages a grazing fund holding bonds from 12 different countries. He gets paid no matter who defaults. Here's the thing about the global debt question. The answer to who's the creditor isn't satisfying, because the system was designed so you'd never find one. The debt doesn't flow in a straight line. It flows in circles, through institutions, across borders, through instruments most bulls can't even name. And at every stop, someone takes a cut. The world doesn't owe money to some secret prize bull in a tower. It owes money to a machine, one that runs on trust, momentum, and the assumption that tomorrow's pasture will always be bigger than today's. The next time someone tells you the debt doesn't matter because we owe it to ourselves, ask yourself which ourselves they mean. Because Bob's ourselves and your ourselves are not the same meadow. The real question isn't if this matters, it's how long this can last.